On June 30th, 1954, the Hungarian men's football team broke the ultimate record of sporting dominance, achieving the highest international ELO rating in human history, a monumental record that stands to this day. They were the pioneers that shaped the sport into what it is now. To this day, many believe they're the greatest football team the world has ever seen. This is a truly mind-boggling accomplishment. For a few fleeting moments, a small country that currently has the same population as the state of New Jersey became the pinnacle of the sporting world. They perfected football, dusting every team they faced for 4 magnificent years. And yet, despite their achievements, they hardly scratched the surface of their potential because of tragedies far beyond their control. Their legacies decayed due to the passage of time. The hearts that once fed the football world are now long gone. But if you look closely, you can see glimmers of their legacy in every football game you watch, and they are beautiful. These are some of the most important men in football history, and they deserve to be remembered, because the Golden Team, or the Mighty Magyars, carry an incredible story that I'm sharing with you today. It's time to meet our heroes. The team's engine was Ferenc Puskás. Short and stout at 5'8", Puskás loved a good meal and had a left foot of the gods. A generational offensive player, Puskás averaged a goal a game in both national and league play over the course of his career. This is astounding. In every game Ferenc Puskás played, his team was pretty much up 1-0 before the game even started. Puskás was the undisputed greatest player in the world when he played. The brain behind this team was manager Gustav Sebes. Sebes's largest innovation was conditioning. Football is at its core 90 minutes of challenging stop-and-go cardio, and Sebes turned that into a weapon for his team to exploit. He even persuaded his players to give up drinking and smoking, certainly no easy feat. The Hungarian football brass had the influence of all-time elite football mind Jimmy Hogan, and their main emphasis was positional flexibility. Sebes wanted every player to develop the basic capabilities expected of every position. The result was revolutionary for the time, a team with positional fluidity and players prepared for any circumstance they could encounter. This is football in its most effective form, a team who can do a little bit of everything with 0 weak links. The tactical backbone that enabled Sebes's vision was a jack-of-all-trades, deep-lying center forward with both striking and defensive capabilities. Nowadays, this is similar to a false 9 role. This was the key to unlocking the team's potential, a playmaking hybrid who can generate possessions and create mismatches for the other strikers to punish. While the system was brilliant, having elite players certainly helps, and the Hungarians were loaded. Puskás was joined by his club teammates Sándor Kocsis, Zoltán Csibor, Josef Bosik, and goalkeeper Gyula Grosics. All of these players were among the best in the world at their positions, and some have claimed that they were just as talented as Puskás. What made this unit truly special was that they all played together on the same team year-round. National teams can often be an awkward hodgepodge of great players with no experience playing together, but these guys actually had chemistry. This wasn't normal. The circumstances behind this are a little odd though. Hungary was a totalitarian state, and the team Budapest Honvéd was run by the army. If they wanted a player, they could conscript him, and he was all theirs. Budapest Honvéd became Gustav Sebes's laboratory of talent acquisition and football experimentation, turning an already good team into world beaters. This seems quite unfair. It would be like if the Lakers could seize NBA superstars for free, giving up nothing in return. No one would let this happen though. Anyways, the Hungarian national team began thrashing their opponents in friendly competition, and they first gathered global attention by winning the Olympic gold medal in 1952. The Olympics are the midterm to the World Cup's final exam, but this meant the world to Hungary, quite literally. World War II crushed the nation a few years prior, and Hungary became a Stalinist state under dictator Mátyás Rákosi. This was a brutal era. Income among the working class drastically decreased, and the crucial government funds necessary to help people make ends meet evaporated due to a combination of rampant corruption and extreme war reparations. Rákosi had absolute power, but it rested on a foundation of sand. Hundreds of thousands of political dissidents disappeared in prison, and the Hungarian people were struggling. For the government, football success was evidence for the effectiveness of their ideology, and the people admired the players. Everyone loves a superstar. Sports are fun and cool, and you can be a national hero if you are a football star. Just don't look at everything else going on. Go out there and cheer for your countrymen. Rákosi shut down all religious institutions, but the national team became the new gods. This is asking far too much of the Hungarian players who just want to succeed at the sport they have played since they were children, but they had no choice in the matter. If any of them spoke up, they would disappear too. The success of the Hungarian national team is negatively correlated with the well-being of the Hungarian people, and unfortunately, this team is the best in the world. In 1953, the Hungarian team traveled to London for a friendly match against England. England had never lost a home game to a team outside of the British Isles. More than 100,000 fans went to Wembley Stadium to watch an expected English victory. Hungary had a lot of hype, but England was riding high. They invented the sport, their national team was elite, and they were ready to show this small Central European country who's boss. Hungary? Yeah, right. England is hungry for a big W.
They actually dropped 2.
Hungary is the real deal. They met the Masters and took the throne, handing England their 2 biggest defeats in history to this point. English football was so embarrassed that they had an existential crisis. This level of skill was alien to them, and they might as well have been playing against extraterrestrial beings designed to play football. Hungary became the crown jewel of the football world, and they were clear favorites to win the 1954 World Cup, the most fascinating sports tournament in human history. "16 teams traveled to Switzerland to create a new sporting world order. Several nations, including Hungary, faced bans in the previous 1950 World Cup due to their involvement in World War II. But global tensions have eased, cooler heads have prevailed, and humanity has progressed. Time for some football. The format of the 1954 World Cup was strange. FIFA never chose this format again, and for good reason. Out of 16 teams, 8 were assigned seeds. These were the powerhouses, among them England, Brazil, Uruguay, and of course, Hungary. The group stage was not a round robin, but rather each seeded team playing each unseeded team in their group. If 2 teams were tied for second place prior to knockouts, they would play an extra game to determine who moves on. But the greatest injustice of all is that all the group winners were assigned the same side of the bracket in the knockout rounds, creating a clear discrepancy between the quality of teams on each side of the bracket. The group winners had to run the gauntlet, while the second place teams got to play pillow fights against each other, at least relatively, until one team established themselves as the best of the rest. This is quite unfair, but from an entertainment perspective, it set up more legendary heavyweight bouts, and in that regard, it worked perfectly. Hungary drew Group 2 with West Germany, Turkey, and South Korea. West Germany is allowed into their first World Cup in a long while, and they are in a strange transitory phase. This is a country without an identity following World War II, and they are looking to pick up the pieces after getting blown to smithereens. West Germany has the unenviable task of reestablishing international goodwill after destroying all of it a decade ago, to put it mildly, while also attempting to rebuild a country from scratch. They do have a great football team though. We'll talk about them more soon. Turkey is making their World Cup debut largely due to good fortune. Turkey battled powerhouse Spain for this spot in qualification matches, one in Madrid, one in Istanbul. The Spaniards won 4-1 at home, the Turks won 1-0 at home, setting the stage for a playoff game at a neutral site around the midpoint of the 2 countries in Rome. Winning you're in, losing you're out. But the game was tied 2-2 at the end of both regulation and extra time. Now what? Penalty shootouts didn't exist yet, and there were no tiebreakers in place. These teams are so even, You might as well pick one of them out of a hat. So that's exactly what they did. They found a kid, blindfolded him, and he drew a piece of paper out of a hat that read Turkey, sending them to their first ever World Cup, and taking Spain's advantageous seeded spot to boot. You know what? Good for them. South Korea rounded out the group by winning the Asian qualifying spot, and this was violent. Fresh off of securing independence, the South Korean team battled their former occupiers in Japan. These countries absolutely hate each other. South Korean President Syngman Rhee refuses to allow the Japanese players into the country, so they agree to play both games in Tokyo. South Korea is in survival mode as a nation, with the Korean War ending less than a year ago, and the national team hasn't played together at all in 3 years. But team manager Lee Yoo-sung is willing to die for this. Literally. Japan struck first in Game 1 before South Korea scored 5 unanswered to get more than halfway to punching their ticket. Now with a 4-goal lead in the aggregate, South Korea had fortune and the divine wind on their side, as a rainstorm turned Game 2 into a sloppy mudfest, and they secured their spot after a 2-2 draw. South Korea had new national heroes, and Syngman Rhee smiled. He got to stick it to Japan one more time. Against all odds, the South Korean team made the cut. The next question was more important than it might seem. How will the team actually get to Switzerland? They got help from the US Air Force, but the team had to split into 2 planes, and the journey took 2 entire days. The second plane arrived just in time, mere hours before South Korea's match against the Hungarians. Already gigantic underdogs on paper, and now jet-lagged, this match was a foregone conclusion. Hungary started their World Cup run with dominance, as usual. At the same time, a few hours away, West Germany beat Turkey comfortably, putting them in strong position for the second spot. But the Germans had a daunting game against the Mighty Magyars next. The Germans had their own merits, though. Manager Sepp Herberger is a legendary coach, and Fritz Walter is one of the best players in the tournament. Despite his talent, Walter is extremely lucky to be here. 12 years ago at the peak of World War II, West Germany played a friendly against the Hungarians in Budapest, and Walter dominated, scoring 2 goals and setting up 3 more en route to a 5-3 German victory. This wasn't the Hungarian football machine of the 50s, but this performance was memorable nevertheless. Walter was pulling double duty as a member of the Air Force, but in the aftermath of Germany's surrender, the Soviets got a hold of him and sent him to a POW camp in Romania. His life was pretty much over. The Soviets would ship him to Siberia, as they did to thousands of other POWs, and he would work mercilessly in a gulag until he died. But that game in Budapest saved his life. Walter was watching the guards kicking the ball around, and they asked him if he wanted to play since they were 1 short of an even number of players. You can't play a pickup game with 7 players. Everyone knows that. Walter showed he was no average Joe, and one of the guards had a hunch that he saw this guy from the stands in Budapest a few years ago. The guard pulled some strings, and Walter's name disappeared from the roster of future Siberians, aka Dead Men Walking, and he was sent back home from Romania to Germany. Walter had a second chance at life, and he's now the captain of the West German team. But Walter would not be playing against Hungary this time around, as Herberger made the bold call to rest his stars. He saw the writing on the wall and decided to let go of the gas pedal, eat the loss, and take his chances on a do-or-die game against Turkey. Hungary beat West Germany convincingly, 8-3, but this came at a heavy cost. Ferenc Puskás took a cleat to the ankle and suffered a hairline fracture. He would have to make a miraculous recovery to play at any point in this tournament again. Hungary would be without their best player indefinitely, and while they had a stacked roster, they did leave meat on the bone. Legendary striker Laszlo Kubala fled the country in 1949 as a refugee and ultimately settled down in Barcelona. He would become the greatest player to ever play for FC Barcelona until a certain little boy from Rosario, Argentina showed up 50 years later. More egregiously excluded was Ferenc Puskás, who was left off solely due to political reasons and disagreement with Gustav Sebes. To this day, Doc has the record for average goals per game in international competition, netting 29 goals in only 20 games for Hungary before his banishment. Hungary was certainly not short on talent, but as a consequence of their oppressive regime, they lost two of the most talented strikers in the world. Nevertheless, they hadn't lost the game in 4 years. They are 3 games away from winning the World Cup, and they are the overwhelming favorites to do so, even without Puskás. The Golden Team seemed destined to earn the most coveted trophy in the world. Meanwhile, Sepp Herberger's gamble worked, as West Germany beat Turkey for the second time to advance to the knockout stage. Fritz Walter and his brother, Otmar, each scored a goal, and West Germany never trailed. They would proceed to beat Yugoslavia comfortably in the quarterfinals, but this would be the least eventful quarterfinal game. Austria and Switzerland faced each other on a scorching hot day in Lausanne, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and humid. This game was avant-garde, to put it kindly. Switzerland scored 3 goals within 4 minutes, and Austria answered with 5 goals in 9 minutes. The players are deeply unwell. Swiss captain Roger Bouquet is in La La Land. Unbeknownst to the public, he's playing through a brain tumor, and it doesn't help that he took an elbow to the head during the game. Austrian goalie Kurt Schmidt is right there with him. He collapsed at halftime and needed help from the team trainer just to stay upright. Neither of these players knows the score. Schmidt later said he has zero memory of this game. These guys are on a completely different planet, and with how hot it was, they might as well have been on Venus. Austria pulled through and beat the home team 7-5, the highest scoring World Cup match of all time. Hungary would play Brazil in a heavily anticipated game of 2 teams that played beautiful football. Brazil was unlucky to run into Hungary so early. They tied with Yugoslavia for the lead in their group standings, and FIFA assigned their spots by drawing out of a hat once again, and Brazil drew the juggernaut side of the bracket. This game was supposed to be fantastic, but the weather did not cooperate, and the Mighty Magyars showed out by scoring twice in the first 7 minutes. Brazil put themselves on the board, but this game turned into a melee after Hungary punched in a penalty kick during the second half. The Brazilians were heated, and team officials ran onto the field to dispute the call. The teams got violent towards each other, racking up 3 ejections and a record 42 fouls. Hungary won the game 4-2, but the final whistle was not the end of the fight. Brazilian players broke into Hungary's locker room. The Hungarian AVH, pretty much their version of the Soviet KGB, hit the players with batons and even pointed their guns. Puskás allegedly hit someone in the head with a bottle. The Brazilian press claimed that referee Arthur Ellis was a radical political agent who fixed the match. To hedge their bets, people also started rumors that they saw Brazilian players out partying the night before. But what's done is done. Brazil was eliminated, and Hungary moved on to the semifinals. Hungary's next opponent was Uruguay. They were the defending champions and had never lost a World Cup match to this point. This game actually did live up to the hype. Hungary struck first, scoring 13 minutes in. This was the latest they have put themselves on the board in this tournament. False 9 Nandor Hidegudi buried another goal, but Uruguay rose to the occasion in the second half as Jon Bois scored 2 goals in a row to tie it up. His teammates piled onto him in celebration of the equalizer, but there was a big problem. Bois isn't getting up. He's dead. I'm serious. Jon Bois suffered cardiac arrest, and he's dead. Team doctor Carlos Abade sprints to give CPR, and miraculously, Bois comes back to life. He was dead for 15 seconds, but he's back now. Jon Bois had a staring contest with the Grim Reaper, and death blinked first. He shakes it off like it's nothing, and he's ready to play again. The game didn't pause, and coaches kept Bois in the game after a literal resurrection. Luckily for him, he has a chance for some rest, as the game is tied after 90 minutes and enters extra time. The Hungarian powerhouse had finally met an equal. This is uncharted territory for both of these teams, a tied game after 90 minutes. But Uruguay had another injury, less fatal this time, but more deadly for their hopes of victory. Victor Andrade pulled a muscle, and he can hardly move out there. This is before the modern era of player substitutions, so Andrade is dead weight, and Uruguay is effectively down a man. The Hungarians pounced as Sandor Kocsis scored twice for another 4-2 Hungarian win, making them undefeated in 30 consecutive games. This match had high expectations and it exceeded them. Journalist Yanni Brera described it as a planetary event, and many immediately labeled this as the match of the century. West Germany blew out Austria 6-1. On paper this was an upset, but several factors tipped the scales in West Germany's favor. The Austrian team was only 4 days removed from the hellish game against Switzerland. Sepp Herberger was the better coach, and Fritz Walter played the game of his life, scoring twice and playing lockdown defense. Hungary had already beaten the empires of football and the other contenders to win it all. People considered West Germany lucky to be here after they pulled off a couple upsets in a row. But the games are played for a reason. Going off of ELO rating, this was the greatest football showdown the world has ever seen to this point, and it would hold that place for 56 years. The match of the century would only hold that spot for 4 days. This is it. The 1954 World Cup final. The match of the 20th century. The Hungarians stay in a hotel in Solothurn, a town 35 minutes north of Bern. The night before the final, Solothurn is hopping due to a town festival, and the Hungarian players toss and turn in their beds. By contrast, the Germans are in Spies, 35 minutes south of Bern. This town is quiet, and they get their full 8 hours. This place is beautiful. I'll have to go here someday. Gustav Szebes makes the bold decision to start Ferenc Puskás, even though he feels far from 100%. He wouldn't miss this game unless he was 6 feet under. Sepp Herberger tinkered with his lineup throughout the tournament, but settled on a final squad after the quarterfinals based on which players had momentum. Right winger Helmut Rahn earned a spot after playing excellently in the quarterfinal, and he is starting today. Not initially chosen for West Germany's roster, Rahn was a young, bubbly guy great for team chemistry. Fritz Walter tended to get nervous before big matches, so Herberger assigned Rahn as Walter's hotel roommate. Rahn showed that he was much more than a personality hire, and he burst onto the scene at this World Cup, working his way up from the B team after a strong showing in the first game against Hungary. The weather has varied wildly during this tournament, and the forecast this morning in Bern is cool with clear skies as the teams head to the stadium. But as the players are warming up, raindrops fall from the heavens. This is a big deal. Fritz Walter had malaria from his time in the military, and his greatest weakness is the heat. As the rain pummels the pitch, Walter smiles. He feels fantastic. He can give it his all today. Team staff member Adi Dassler previously told Herberger about experimental screw-in shoe studs for inclement weather, and Herberger gives him the green light to put them in. Hungary had the better talent, and anything short of perfect preparation for West Germany wouldn't be enough to even stand a chance. But the Germans are locked in today. Game time. Puskás struck first 6 minutes in, and Zoltan Cibor buried another 2 minutes later. Max Morlock put the Germans on the board, and Rahn delivered another goal to tie the game. Walter notching assists on both. 4 total goals in 18 minutes, 2 apiece. As the weather worsened, so too did the offenses, and the score held until halftime. The Mighty Magyars are unsettled. Uruguay gave them a good fight, but today is different. They're visibly out of it. Meanwhile, at the half, Adi Dassler switches out the studs he had inserted for even longer ones. Hungary struggled in the mud. Despite their notorious conditioning, they were ill-equipped for the weather, while the West Germany team glided through the downpour. The game remained tied deep into the second half, but West Germany looked like Hungary's equal. This was shocking. I know I just spent a few minutes talking about their advantages, but the public didn't know about them at the time. All they saw was the greatest team in the world getting outplayed by footballers from a country simply happy to be there. In retrospect, I do believe the German squad was not given enough credit, but that being said, it's hard to put into words the sheer insanity of Hungary going undefeated in 30 games over 4 years. Plus they curb-stomped West Germany in the group stage, albeit with an asterisk. With 10 minutes to go, the game remains tied. Someone has to break the ice. Many believe the 1954 World Cup was the best ever. To this day, it is the highest scoring iteration, with an average of 5.38 goals per game, boosted by Hungary's historic offense and Austria's frenetic quarterfinal win over Switzerland. Yet neither team has scored for more than an hour now. The outcome of this game goes far, far beyond football. For Hungary, this is one of the nation's only hopes. They are struggling badly, but they have the Mighty Magyars to make them proud. Matyas Rakosi stripped the Hungarians of almost everything except bread and the circus that is football, and they're running out of bread. For West Germany, the national team is finally a shred of optimism. The 1940s was the decade of German humiliation as perpetrators of genocide and cruelty. The old leaders are dead now, and new people are in charge now, and they're doing a great job at rebuilding the nation, but ugly remnants of the past still remain. To address an inescapable truth, Coach Herberger and several players had involvement in Nazi Germany. World War II caused up to 75 million casualties, and a large portion of them were due to German actions. Don't let anyone try to belittle this number. This was the deadliest conflict in human history, and the largest cause was German aggression. 11 million civilians lost their lives in Germany's systematic purges, and no one was too sacred. Former German national team player and World War I veteran Julius Hirsch died in Auschwitz at 53 years old. As public figures, anything short of complete compliance from football players or coaches would have put their lives at risk. I could sit here at my desk 80 years later and say that Herberger was complicit in genocide, and I wouldn't be wrong. But I also recognize that German leadership would consider disappearing Herberger, Walter, or anyone else if they showed defiance, just as they did to 11 million other civilians like Julius Hirsch with zero hesitation or self-reflection. If signing up for my own death would inspire no change, I wouldn't choose to die either. These are normal people dealing with a monstrously irrational actor. What's even worse than a maniacal regime is a maniacal regime that thinks it is righteous. 10 years before this game, Germany was a pile of post-war rubble. 7 years ago, hundreds of thousands of Germans died in a brutal winter due to starvation and exposure to the elements. 6 years ago, Germany became a nation divided between West and East, the pressure point of the Iron Curtain and the subject of endless geopolitical tension during the Cold War. These problems won't go away anytime soon, but for 90 minutes, they don't matter. All eyes and ears are on the field in Bern, Switzerland. In the 84th minute, a corner kick set up Helmut Rahn with room to operate. He wasn't supposed to be here today, but he earned this opportunity, and the world is watching. This is the first ever World Cup final to air on television, granting millions the unprecedented access to enjoy the game from afar. But the most famous commentary wouldn't come from TV. It came from German radio announcer Herbert Zimmermann. You probably know where this is going. I'll let him take it away.
Im Hintergrund müsste Rahn schießen. Rahn schießt! Tor! 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 Tor!
West Germany is a few minutes away from the greatest upset in football history, but they have to hold on to this lead. Ferenc Puskás gets a brilliant chance on a breakaway with 4 minutes to go, and he punches in the equalizer. But the linesman Mervyn Griffiths flags him for being offside. No goal. This call is canon. no challenges, no replays, no VAR. We are lucky to even have this game on camera. The surviving footage of this moment seems to indicate that Puskás was onside, but this is far from conclusive, despite what the YouTube comments on the video might try to tell you. This was a very close call, and the referee's decision is what we have to go with. I'm so sorry. Hungary doesn't get any more good chances, and the game is over. West Germany defeated football's empire. The Hungarian national team had found their Waterloo, and in hindsight, maybe they should have noticed the bad omen. For the first time in ages, Germany had reason to celebrate, and boy did they. Germans crowded the streets, chanting, "We are somebody again." Being German was no longer a sin. In many people's eyes, this day was the birth of Germany's new identity, a country fueled by the Marshall Plan, making gigantic economic strides, becoming allies with other Western nations, and now a proud World Cup champion. Adi Dassler also became a national hero, and even if you haven't heard of him, you definitely know of his work. German politicians exercised modesty, knowing that the world would not exactly be pleased at a drunken roar of German patriotism. The rest of Europe was quite upset due to both lingering resentment and plain old sporting envy, but at least the British could eat bacon now to cope. Meanwhile, Hungary was utterly enraged. The concept of defeat was so foreign to them that they said the match had to be fixed. Angry fans took to the streets, wished death upon Gustav Sebes, and broke the windows of his home. The ashamed Hungarian team had to sneak home to avoid the outrage. Their lives were genuinely at risk. Goalie and scapegoat Gyula Grosic was arrested and charged with treason, and the regime fired his father from his mining job for no apparent reason other than pettiness. The government harassed Grosic with interrogations for more than a year, placed him under house arrest, and exiled him from Budapest to the small town of Tatabánya. This was cruelty for the sake of cruelty. Gyula Grosic just wanted to play football. Placing the national team on this high of a pedestal guaranteed their demise. Even if they won this game, any defeat in the future would have shattered their image. Athletes are not gods. Framing them as Übermensch or saviors of the masses solely because they are good at a game is setting them up for inevitable disappointment. This isn't right. The Hungarian regime put all of their eggs in the Mighty Magyars basket to boost the morale of their entire nation. They suppressed art, music, culture, religion, and basic human needs. Matyas Rakosi depended on bread and circuses to keep his absolute power intact, and now he has neither. The national team continued to dominate in friendly competition after 1954, but the defeat in the World Cup final haunted them. If analytics existed at the time, Hungary almost certainly had the better statistics in the game, but West Germany got the breaks they needed to stand a chance, and they delivered on the biggest stage. They did have one more secret advantage, only discovered years later. After the game, Puskás said he saw German players physically sick in their locker rooms. People later found used syringes, which German coaches said were for vitamin C injections. If you haven't heard of vitamin C injections, that would be because they have almost zero use. You might as well just eat an orange at halftime like the rest of us. This was a little white lie. In 2013, researchers revealed that West Germany engaged in a government-backed doping program to boost the powers of their athletes. Stimulants fueled the German military in the 1940s, and the athletes had their own power-ups. 2,000 years ago, Sun Tzu said that speed is the essence of war, and Germany pushed this adage to a new chemical horizon. The national team players regularly took Pervitin tablets, and Lord knows what was in those injections, but it wasn't vitamin C. Several players contracted jaundice after the tournament. Player Richard Herman fell ill with liver cirrhosis and died 8 years after the World Cup at only 39 years old. The spine behind the feel-good story about the strength of coaching, teamwork, and innovation was substance abuse. FIFA had no rules banning any drugs at the time, and rumor has it that West Germany was not the only team using substances that are banned or illegal today. but it might have given them the unethical boost they needed to defeat the greatest team in football history. For this reason, many regard the 1954 World Cup final as a tragedy, the Golden Team losing the trophy and the crowning accomplishment that they righteously deserved due to foul play. Hungary was the more talented team, but West Germany beat Hungary on July 4th, 1954 by taking advantage of every exploit they possibly could without breaking the rules given to them. Follies like this are the reason why we can preserve fairness more strongly today. West Germany got to reap the rewards. Hungary is still a football empire that should have more chances in the years to come, but this is a broken country, and people are fed up. Hungary won 16 of their ensuing 19 friendlies in the rest of 1954 and 1955, showing that they still have it. Meanwhile, the Eastern Bloc is undergoing a massive transition as Nikita Khrushchev is cementing himself as the new leader of the Soviet Union after Joseph Stalin died 3 years ago, and he made a splash. In February 1956, Khrushchev delivered a 4-hour speech titled "On the Cult of Personality and Its Consequences," in which he heavily criticized Stalin as an egomaniacal false idol who strayed from Leninist ideals by killing political dissidents and forcing the relocation of entire ethnic groups. After decades of forced praise for Stalin, this speech was so shocking that some listeners had to leave the room to vomit or required medical attention for heart attacks. That's plural. This speech gave multiple people heart attacks. The writing was on the wall at this point for the die-hard Stalinist Matyas Rakosi, and the Soviets fired him a few months later, putting in place Arno Gero as his successor. But Gero was Rakosi's right-hand man. This was a lateral move at best, and the Hungarians hated it. With Khrushchev promising a new and improved era, but a sitting duck Gero in the way, tensions are sky high in Hungary. Access to international art, music, literature, and television depend upon getting this guy out of here. But for now, at least they have their football team. In September of 1956, Hungary played a friendly against the Soviet Union in Moscow, the overlords against one of their many puppet states. The Soviet side had never lost a home game, and they developed a strong football program of their own, but Hungary showed them up with a 1-0 defeat in front of a crowd of more than 100,000 Russians. This match had the deep consequence of adding even more powder to a keg about to ignite. Hungarian pride in their national team rose from the ashes. If the Mighty Magyars can beat them on the pitch, then maybe they can hold their own as people against the loosening grip of the Soviet Union. On October 23rd, 20,000 people met in Budapest for a peaceful protest organized by university students. They listed their demands: national independence, freedom from foreign powers, removal of Soviet troops, and basic human rights. Arno Gero shut them down. By nightfall, the crowd grew to 200,000. They tore down a statue of Joseph Stalin, symbolically rejecting his former dominance, leaving behind only 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone. The AVH state police turned violent. In a move I can only describe as stupid, the AVH disguised themselves by driving Red Cross ambulances and wearing white coats, masking as guardian angels before attacking the people. The crowd quickly subdued the AVH, and the regular Hungarian police sided with the masses. So did the Hungarian military. After so many years of suffering, this is their moment. They're willing to die for this. Arno Gero requested help from Moscow, and the Red Army was en route to Budapest, but he has run out of time. The people successfully deposed Gero and installed Imre Nagy, a much calmer and more popular leader. Nagy promised free elections, the dissolution of the AVH, and withdrawal from the Soviet-aligned Warsaw Pact, which he quickly completed. Finally, a happy ending. But no. The Red Army returns to Budapest, this time with all units in full force, in the early morning of November 4th, after 11 days of relative peace and progress under Nagy. The ragtag team of rebels with Molotov cocktails and firearms they grabbed off the sidewalk stood no chance against 1,000 armored tanks and a mobilized military. This was not a fair fight. This was a demolition. Noj takes to the radio, giving one last plea. Soon after, he will be captured, arrested, and executed. The Soviets surrounded the Hungarian parliament building, and every remaining politician evacuated, except one man, Minister of State István Bibo. He's typing in his office, undeterred by the chaos around him, and he stays in the building for 3 whole days. He writes a call for help, appealing to the United Nations to do what is right. He translates the text into several different languages on his own and prints out several copies before calmly leaving his post. May God protect Hungary. But ink and paper are no match to steel and gunpowder once the social contract breaks, and no one is coming to help Hungary. Western powers have their hands full. Britain and France are busy throwing an armed temper tantrum in Egypt over the shutdown of the Suez Canal, an act of aggression so dumb that neither the USA nor the Soviet Union take their side. Dwight Eisenhower doesn't want to start World War III by intervening, which is unfortunately pretty understandable. He condemns the invasion, but offers little more than thoughts and prayers. Too late. The revolution is over. Hungary is in ruins, a helpless nation to be domineered against their wills for many more decades. 2,000 people died, 200,000 people fled the country, and the beautiful city of Budapest is now a discontented pile of rubble. Hungary is completely, helplessly broken. This is a tragedy. The Mighty Magyars mostly watched this unfold from afar. Budapest Honvéd and the core of the national team was in Spain, preparing for their first game in the 1956 European Cup against Athletic Bilbao. Throughout the revolution, they had no idea whether their loved ones were dead or alive. They don't know how people would react to their homecoming since they represented the government that the people just revolted against, and they don't want to find out. They're not taking any chances. They're not coming home. With their lives in limbo, Budapest Honvéd had to suit up on November 22nd in Bilbao for what could be their final time playing football together. The good news is that their families are okay, and many of them made the trip to Spain on one-way tickets, knowing that they would almost certainly never come back. The bad news is that Budapest Honvéd lost 3-2, and they would need to win by 2 or more goals in the second leg to advance in the tournament. The team worked out a deal to play the game in Brussels. This is it. This is a win-or-go-home game in which Honvéd literally can't go home if they lose. Win by 2 goals, and you can keep playing together in a last ride that will be remembered forever. Lose, and you are out of a job with nowhere to go. Budapest Honvéd is in survival mode. They are not the only national athletes caught in the chaos. The Hungarian national water polo team is in the mountains training for the 1956 Summer Olympics in Melbourne, Australia. They saw smoke from below and relocated to Czechoslovakia to finish their preparations, but they had no idea how bad it was until they landed in Australia. Only one player spoke English, and he translated and read aloud the Australian newspapers to the horror of everyone in the room. This team won 3 out of the last 4 gold medals, but they were rattled, having no idea if their family or friends were safe. The USSR participated in the Olympics, which prompted Spain, Switzerland, and the Netherlands to boycott in response to the Soviet attack in Budapest, but Hungary was already on the road at that point. Might as well play for national pride. The water polo players tore out the communist emblem from the Hungarian flag, realizing that the world would be watching them. They won every game before facing the Soviet Union in the semifinals. To say that these two sides hate each other would be a huge understatement. Their countries were literally in combat at home mere days ago. The bad blood is boiling hot. Beforehand, the Soviets used their satellite state powers to spy on the Hungarian team during their practices. A Bill Belichick-esque distasteful move, but Hungary couldn't do anything about it. The Hungarian players refused to shake hands with their oppressors. This is a proxy war in an Olympic pool. Within the first minute of play, a Russian player takes a penalty, their first of several. The Hungarians worked their way to a 4-0 lead, while the players shouted obscenities back and forth at each other. With under 2 minutes to go, and the game out of reach, Russian player Valentin Prokopov punches Ervin Zador in the face, cutting him in the forehead. He's bleeding badly. The sold-out crowd erupts, storming the barricades and throwing anything they could get their hands on at the Soviet team. The referee calls off the game. The next day, the Hungarian team won the gold medal match against Yugoslavia. As Zador sat on the sidelines with a swollen eye and 8 stitches in his forehead, he made up his mind. He isn't coming back home. At only 21 years old and a dominant player, he could have been a national superstar, but he doesn't want anything to do with this regime. Half of all Hungarian Olympians in Melbourne join him in defecting. So too did Budapest Honvéd. With incredible pressure on them and already behind the 8 ball, Honvéd couldn't rise to the occasion. They tied 3-3 in Brussels, so they were eliminated, not just from the tournament, but from Hungarian football forever. The Hungarian Football Federation exiled them, and FIFA cooperated. Budapest Honvéd were now stateless aliens on planet Earth. But people wanted to see these guys play. They heard legends about them. They're internationally beloved. Honvéd takes to the road on a fundraising tour, playing exhibition matches in Spain, Portugal, Italy, and one last trip to Brazil. They got help along the way from a former nemesis. Fritz Walter had his life saved by a Hungarian prison guard, and he is now returning the favor by acting as Budapest Honvéd's manager and angel investor. Mexico offers the team political asylum, but they decline. The players return to Europe and say their goodbyes. This would be their final games for Honvéd, but this is not the end. Ferenc Puskás faced a 2-year ban from UEFA for refusing to return to Hungary. He negotiated with clubs across Europe to find a new home, but several of them turned him down due to his age. He wouldn't play again until he's 31, and the fact that he looked out of shape. He landed in Real Madrid thanks to ties with an old manager, and in his second game with his new team, he scored 4 goals. The elder, overweight, countryless Puskás still had it. He would play 8 dominant seasons for Real Madrid, finishing as La Liga's top scorer in 4 of them. To this day, he is Real Madrid's 6th highest goal scorer and the 2nd highest in terms of goals per game. Puskás gained Spanish citizenship in 1962, and he would not step foot in Hungary again until 1981, more than 25 years after he left. He had good reason not to. The new Hungarian regime labeled him as a traitor and silenced news of his footballing dominance. He wasn't the only one. Sandor Kocsis and Zoltan Cibor found their homes at FC Barcelona after persuasion by a fellow exile way back when, Laszlo Kubala. They added even more talent to a loaded team, and upon their arrivals, Barcelona won La Liga in both 1959 and 1960. Meanwhile, Gyula Grosic and most other national team players with other clubs stayed with Hungary through it all, while Puskás, Kocsis, Kubala, and Cibor became Spanish legends. Gyula Grosic lived in relative obscurity at home. The Hungarian team qualified for the 1958 and 1962 World Cups, but they failed to make it past the quarterfinals, a shadow of their former glory. They have not qualified for a World Cup since 1986. In 1989, with his playing career long over, Ferenc Puskás accepted a job to manage South Melbourne FC in Australia. He had traveled the world at this point, managing teams in every continent except Antarctica. He doesn't speak English very well, but his Greek isn't half bad, and he understands the beautiful game better than almost anyone who has ever lived. Football in Australia was bare bones at the time, with even the upper echelon of teams being semi-professional. The players had no idea how good he once was until he pulled up his highlights and showed them. Team staff were largely volunteers, and average game attendance was only a few thousand fans, a far cry from the crowds of more than 100,000 that Puskás used to draw. Puskás played football at the highest level in the world and bore witness to the rise and fall of empires. He had invaluable knowledge of the sport, but his coaching advice was simple: just go out there and have fun. He loved the players, and they loved him. He saw the best and worst humanity had to offer, and he chose to emulate the best. Very little is better than a perfectly placed top corner goal or a delicious meal. South Melbourne FC went from 8th place in league standings to 2nd upon his arrival, and the next season, they won the National Soccer League, cementing Puskás as a local legend. Today, if you visit Melbourne's Olympic precinct, the same place where the Hungarian water polo team fought for their country and won gold in 1956, you will find a statue of the Hungarian Ferenc Puskás nestled among the trees, kicking a football with his howitzer of a left leg, among the many statues of classic Australian sporting legends. The man traveled the world, and he left a legacy everywhere he went. He never wanted to become a national icon or a footballing hero. He just wanted to play the beautiful game and share a nice meal afterwards with his family and friends. But he left every place better than he found it, and every person he met happier than before they knew him. And for that alone, Ferenc Puskás is a legend of humanity. The Mighty Magyars were one of the greatest teams ever assembled, and in all likelihood, the best to ever win the World Cup. The Golden Team has passed away, and the last surviving participant of West Germany's 1954 team died in 2021. Matyás Rákosi was once the most powerful man in Hungary, and yet his only remnant is a tombstone in Budapest, marked only with his initials due to repeated incidents of vandalism. Nothing beside remains, but while his domination has decayed into dust, the Mighty Magyars will be forever remembered. No external might could suppress their impact on the world, and if you look closely, you can see bits and pieces of the legacy they left behind, even in places you would least expect. Political regimes still take advantage of the perceived innocence of sports as a sort of Trojan horse to cover up oppression, but we have the freedom to strip away the mask if we so choose. This is our greatest gift. We can celebrate beauty instead of tyranny, and creation instead of destruction in all facets of life. Never take this for granted, and never let anyone take it from you. I'll leave you with this. As I write and record this video, the world spotlight shines upon a new Mighty Magyar. On May 9th, 2026, Peter Magyar took office as the Prime Minister of Hungary, a triumph of the Hungarian people after decades of corruption and kleptocracy. 70 years after the Soviets seized Budapest, Hungary has a newfound hope. To quote István Bibo as he sat in the Parliament building, typing words he was willing to die for as the final holdout of the Hungarian Revolution, "May God protect Hungary."